Right guys, today we're going to be talking all about junk volume and how more is not always better. One of the most common mistakes we see beginners make and the most common questions we get is all about volume, sets and reps. And a frequent question you'll be asked is, how long do you spend in the gym? How many days a week do you go to the gym? And people think these two things equate to how hard you're working and therefore how much effort you're putting in, how much you're going to get out. But this isn't the case. Adding more sets, more reps, more exercises, more sessions in the gym each week does not always translate into better results. Oftentimes it will generate more fatigue and this will hinder our progress. Thus we call it junk volume. So if we take a look at this little graph here, we've got the gains and we've got the volume. The amount will grow and the amount we do. And obviously one set is the minimum amount of volume we can get growth from. So that's where we'll see this big spike up. 2 sets we'll see slightly less, 3 sets slightly less, 4 sets slightly less, and there's a point where we plateau and any more sets isn't adding any more progress. And then this is where we run into junk volume, where our recovery needs from the training we do are outweighed by the volume that we do, so we can't recover from that volume. We run into problems, we no longer have that stimulus recovery adaptation curve, and our gains will drop off from any additional volume, which is obviously negative towards the goal we're trying to achieve of growing. So we need to be in that sweet spot where we create enough to grow, but not too much to go over the point. So a lot of people think junk volume is just anything past the point of efficiency, as in getting the most from the least, but that is just a case of arguing semantics. Junk volume is really talking about when you do a quantity of volume or exercises, sets, reps, etc., when you end up hamstringing yourself and doing an amount you can't recover from. So it's past your maximum recoverable volume. So it's not it's more work than the minimum effective dose, so therefore it's inefficient, therefore it's junk. That's not how we clarify it. Junk volume is actually that point where it hinders progress. You can argue and you can say, anything past the least we can do to get the most out of, i.e. anything past 1 set is junk, because the first set is most effective, and the second set is half as effective as that, the third set half as effective as that. But that isn't really what junk volume is all about. It's more about that actual point where you start negatively impacting your own progress. So if we want to generate productive volume, we need to generate a meaningful stimulus from each set we do, which means that the stimulus we would create will outweigh the fatigue that we create. And we'll run into junk volume when the fatigue we create will outweigh the stimulus that we get. So if set 1 gives us X gains, set 2 gives us X divided by 2 gains, set 3 gives us X divided by 4 gains, set 4 gives us X divided by 8 gains, etc., etc. You can see a point where you could argue that set 4 and onwards is no longer giving us meaningful stimulus. It far outweighs fatigue to the stimulus that we would get from these first 3 sets. That 4th set, 5th set, 6th set and onwards are only adding a tiny little bit of stimulus compared to those first sets. Obviously the first set's the most effective set. You could argue the second set being half as effective as the first is still plenty enough. Third set half as effective as that could be the icing on top. You could stop there and not carry on. You could count these as all productive sets, and you could say that that was a productive amount of volume. You generated enough stimulus and you didn't overdo the fatigue, especially when you're looking at training things that generate systemic fatigue, axially loading lifts, squats, deadlifts, bent over rows, RDLs, standing military press, anything where that weight is loaded through that spine. Going past these points, you will be generating more fatigue systemically, not only locally. So that is going to hinder the recovery. That is going to create more fatigue, less stimulus, and that is going to be far less effective for gains. So you could even argue that point past that second set, going on to that third set, you're generating more fatigue than it's worth, and it is no longer productive volume. So a couple low stimulus, high fatigue activities people take place in the gym without realizing is simply just doing too many sets of a given exercise. They might decide we're training bench, they might end up doing 5 or 6 sets, just too much to generate a meaningful and productive amount of volume. They might look at adding exercises blindly because they think they need to get lots of different things done in order to attack that muscle from different angles, generate different stimulus. This sort of vibe, you see people chest day all the time. They'll do a flat bench, an incline bench, decline bench, a flat fly, an incline fly, a decline fly, dips, pullovers. They'll do every chest exercise from every angle, every which way they can, and it just no longer is productive. It's just a waste of time. It's just flapping around. They should choose the best, biggest, meatiest exercises, the ones they enjoy the most, lift those heavy and move on. You also see people training past the pump. They'll get nice and full, they'll get nice and round, everything hurts, everything burns, they can hardly move, and they decide to just pick up some lighter and lighter weights just to keep moving, just to keep going through those motions. It's pointless at that point, no longer is it productive volume. And you also see people chasing exhaustion almost just for the sake of looking like they're trying hard. They will drop the weights off, go down to do body weight, go down and they're trying to get this sort of red face vomit in the toilet, sort of look how hardcore we train. But instead of doing that with high intensity, they're just doing it with as much fluff as they can to actually feel like they're fully burnt out at the end of their session, as opposed to lifting adequate weight and trying hard in the first place. So the most important thing when it comes to volume is your own ability to recover from it. There is no set in stone golden rules of set ranges, rep ranges, total number of sets we can do per muscle group per week. There's only evidence informed ranges we can base this on, and it usually averages out to about 10 sets per muscle group per week as sort of the lowest effective volume that we can start with. We can work our way up from there. And if we're past that point already, if you're already doing more than 10 sets per muscle group per week, if you start getting worse pumps in the gym, if your strength is stalling, if you're always sore and you can't explain why, if your workouts feel like a chore, if you have low motivation to train, if you have poor sleep quality, poor digestion quality, or you keep suffering from injuries, your volume might be at the point where it's no longer productive. It is irrecoverable. You are generating more fatigue than stimulus. You're not getting that stimulus recovery adaptation curve that we need. You are not recovering enough to create an adaptation to meaningfully progress in the gym. So you might need to strip back your volume. So the best way we can look at tackling junk volume, if our volume is too high, no longer productive, for 2 to 4 weeks, this is a little challenge for you, you're going to reduce the number of sets you do in each workout by 20 to 40%. If you're going on that lower end and you're only doing 2 weeks, I'd go on the higher end and do 40%. If you're going on the higher end, you're doing 4 weeks, I'd go on that lower end and reduce by 20%. You're going to look at adding an extra rest day each week. So if you have 5 days a week you train, you're going to look at having 4 days a week you train for those 2 to 4 weeks. You're going to increase your peri-workout carbohydrate intake. So move some of those carbs from those later meals and early meals and put those into your pre, intra and post-workout meals, please. And you're going to up your training intensity to equate and make up for this lowering in training volume. So if you do train with reps in reserve, i.e. you leave gains on the table, we are going to train to failure instead for this 2 to 4 week period. We're going to actually try and push some weights up, push some numbers up in the gym and see how we feel after that. And that will be the easiest, most productive way to cut out some of that junk volume, reset a little bit. If we feel better after this, we could look at upping that volume again, or we could look at keeping it lower, as we can now see whether we are able to recover from it or not. If we're still doing too high volume, again, rinse and repeat until we are still good to go. Rinse and repeat until we're actually making progress in the gym and we are achieving a productive amount of volume with enough stimulus and low enough fatigue to recover from, to adapt from, to grow in the gym. So I hope I've not prattled on too long about junk volume and how we can lower it, eliminate it, and get back into that productive working range. But to summarize, I would say quality will always trump quantity when it comes in the gym. Proper execution of our form, our technique, our diet, our sleep, the exercise selection we choose, how hard we train, going to failure, looking at pushing ourselves on compounds and isolations, and progressively overloading over as much time as we can in a productive calorie surplus is the best way to grow. Going beyond adding in junk volume doesn't help. More is not always better. As Dorian Yates put it quite recently, a bag of poo that gets bigger is just a bigger bag of poo. So I'll leave it there for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Tune in next time. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And we'll be talking all about something that everyone will be interested in. So I'll see you then.